She did not wield justice with a sword. She served it on a silver platter. In a kingdom torn by rebellion and rot, one queen silenced her enemies not through war, but through something far darker. At a banquet that would become legend, she unveiled a dish so monstrous, so unspeakable, that even the gods were said to look away in horror. This queen forced her enemies to eat their own children and called it justice. But the true horror was not what she did that night. It was what came after. The hunger never left. The guards remembered the sound more than the sight. Not the cries, not the bones cracking between teeth, but the silence that followed. A stillness so heavy it smothered the torches on the walls, as if the castle itself recoiled in shame. Years later, when old soldiers spoke of Queen Amara, they did so behind locked doors. No monarch had ever ruled a land so ravaged by war, nor exacted vengeance so monstrous it defied the very nature of justice. But Amara had not been born to cruelty. No, she had been carved into it. Before she was a queen, she was a girl hidden behind tapestries, forced to listen as her father, King Dorian IV, negotiated her life away like a dowry of cattle. Her mother died coughing blood. Her nursemaid hung for theft. Amara learned early that power did not come from bloodlines or mercy. It came from not flinching when others screamed. When the war began, she was 17. A rebellion in the eastern provinces had ignited the kingdom like dry wheat. The rebels called themselves the Thorn Circle. They were peasants and merchants, former soldiers and worse, traitors of noble blood. They didn't fight for gold or land, but for vengeance against Dorian's brutal tax campaigns and the slow starvation of their children. The king dismissed them at first. By the time he realized they had carved out nearly a third of his territory, it was too late. He marched with 10,000 men to retake the east and did not return. The body of King Dorian IV was delivered in a cart, head severed and placed gently in his lap, as if mocking his final dignity. Amara, now barely 18, was declared queen in a hall still reeking of her father's blood. The court expected her to crumble. She did not. She executed 2 generals within the week for cowardice, then 3 lords for plotting escape to safer kingdoms. She sealed every gate, posted spies in every village, and offered gold to any man who brought her a rebel's tongue. But it was not enough. By the 2nd year of her reign, the rebels had pushed as far as the river Bran, severing the kingdom in 2. Cities fell, castles burned. The queen's court whispered that the gods had cursed her line. And yet Amara stood, pale, sharp-eyed, unreadable. No one could say if she mourned her father or loathed him. Then, from the darkness, came the man who would change everything. His name was Jalen Moore, a former scholar turned war strategist. Banished years ago for heresy, he arrived uninvited at Amara's gates, wrapped in ragged furs and dried blood, carrying maps soaked with ink and madness. He spoke softly, like a man whose tongue weighed heavy from secrets. He offered her not peace, but something far more seductive: revenge. He claimed to know the rebel structure, their hideouts, their fears, and more. He whispered of a tactic that would do more than kill them. It would break them. Amara listened. The plan was simple and horrific. The Thorn Circle had captured dozens of nobles during their uprising. Amara's cousins, uncles, distant lords and ladies now held hostage across the rebel lands. Jalen proposed a trade, their lives for peace. But it was a lie. Amara sent word she would offer a grand feast, an armistice dinner, under sacred law which neither side would dare violate. The rebels, hungering for legitimacy and weary from war, agreed. The banquet was arranged in the ruined city of Karelia, once a jewel of the eastern provinces. The hall was draped in black velvet, with food piled high, roasted game, sugared fruits, golden wine. The rebel leaders came, cloaked in suspicion but drawn by desperation. Amara greeted them herself. She wore her mother's funeral gown, her eyes lined in kohl, her voice soft as a prayer. She raised a glass and thanked them for coming, said she wanted to end the bloodshed, said she wanted the kingdom to heal. The rebels relaxed, they ate, they laughed, and then the cloches were removed. Each platter bore not lamb or boar, but fragments of tiny bones, scraps of silk, a child's ring still crusted with blood. Amara did not smile. "These were your own," she said coldly. "Your sons and daughters. You taught them to call me tyrant. Now let them be your feast." Panic broke the hall. Men choked, women screamed, others retched and clawed at their tongues. The doors were sealed. She watched them suffer. She watched them swallow. When it was over, she turned to her silent guards and whispered only one word: "Remember." And so began the second half of the war, one not of swords but of fear. But what Amara did not know was that someone among the rebels had survived, and he had not come to bargain. He had come to destroy her from within. The survivor was not counted among the fallen. No one remembered his face, for it had long since vanished behind soot and ash. His name was erased from rebel rosters, struck out after the massacre at Keralith. To the world, he was another ghost in the wreckage of Amara's vengeance. But in truth, he had survived. By crawling through the corpse-choked sewers of the old banquet hall, half dead and soaked in filth and blood. For weeks he wandered the outskirts of the kingdom. He did not eat, he did not sleep. He whispered the names of the children whose bones had been fed to their parents. He traced their initials on tree bark, on rocks, on his own skin, not out of grief, but ritual. He did not mourn them, he became them. He would not raise a sword, he would not call armies. He would do what Amara had done, rot her from within. In the capital, Queen Amara's triumph had become legend. She had tamed the East with a single banquet. Poets spun songs of her ruthlessness. Nobles drank to her name. Her court grew fat again. The whispers of rebellion were choked into silence. Mothers warned their children of her eyes in the dark, but victory had a price. And in quiet corners of the palace, strange things began to happen. It began with dreams. The queen's steward slit his own throat after claiming the sound of crying children followed him through the walls. Her personal maid awoke screaming night after night, unable to speak of what she had seen, only clawing at her stomach as if something inside her needed to be cut out. One by one, the queen's inner circle began to unravel. Some vanished entirely. Others claimed the dead were walking the halls. Amara said nothing. She did not believe in ghosts. She believed in guilt. She summoned her High Inquisitor, a mute man named Selric who communicated with chalk and dagger. Selric believed the castle had been infiltrated not by ghosts, but by a man, a sleeper, a poisoner, a saboteur. They searched the castle for weeks. Walls were torn open, servants interrogated, no sign of any intruder, but the fear grew. Amara stopped sleeping. She wandered the halls barefoot at night, trailing her fingers along cold stone, listening for the sound of dripping blood. And in those moments, alone, unslept, unseen, she thought she heard hymns. The boy she had fed to his father, laughing in the dark. One morning, as frost coated the windows of the western tower, a noblewoman was found dead in the queen's bath. Her body was untouched, but her mouth had been sewn shut with golden thread. On the wall, a single phrase was scratched in iron: "Do you taste it yet?" Amara's composure cracked. She ordered the palace sealed, no one in, no one out. The kitchens were purged. Her most loyal guards stood watch over her chambers, rotated hourly. She changed servants daily, ordered double rations of wine, and burned incense night and day. Still, it was not enough. Celric, the silent inquisitor, was found in the chapel, nailed to the altar with his own writing hand. His remaining hand had scrawled something in blood over and over. "We are still eating." Amara stared at the words long after the body was taken away. She no longer drank the wine. She stopped eating altogether. Her dresses hung loose at the collarbone. Her voice, once so cold and measured, now trembled when she spoke. And all the while, the man with no name watched. He had taken no blade. He needed no poison. He became whispers. He became shadows. He passed through cracks like smoke. He listened at doors, mapped routines, learned the rhythms of her waking madness. He sent no message. He left no trace. But then, one night, the silence broke. Amara awoke to find a child standing at the foot of her bed. No guards, no footsteps, no sound. Just a pale girl in a gray dress, hair matted with damp earth, staring with eyes too wide, too hollow to be living. Amara screamed, stumbling back, only to blink and find the room empty again. She began locking herself inside. Then she boarded the windows. Then she began scratching sigils into the wood, bloodied her own fingernails until they split. She wept before the throne, not out of fear, but because she did not know if she was being haunted or if the ghosts were right. And that very night, her favorite food taster, one of the last still trusted, was found dead. Not poisoned, not stabbed. His throat had been filled with tiny bones. The queen did not attend court for 6 days. The throne stood empty, its velvet seat untouched, as rumors clawed through the palace like rats. Some said she had gone mad. Others whispered she was dead and her body hidden by loyalists to preserve the illusion of control. The truth was far stranger. Amara had retreated to the Black Tower, the oldest, coldest part of the castle, once used to store plague victims during the Second Famine. She kept no servants, no food, only torches and records. She devoured scrolls by candlelight, studying ancient rites, forgotten laws, exiled gods, anything that might explain the spiral she had descended into. She was no longer queen of a nation. She was queen of fear. Every mirror had been smashed, every reflective surface covered. Her own reflection now terrified her. Not because it showed something monstrous, but because lately it had begun to smile back, and still the court waited. It was only when the crops failed again, black rot eating through the fields like a curse, that the nobles demanded her presence. Reluctantly skeletal and silent, Amara emerged. She gave no speeches. She offered no answers. She only stood hollow-eyed before the court and listened. They pleaded for solutions, and she gave them one. She ordered a ritual, a public cleansing. The rebellion, she said, had cursed the land with their blood. Only by purging its stain from the nobility could the kingdom heal. She named 10 families, those with relatives who had once supported the Thorn Circle. Whether they still lived or not did not matter. Guilt, she claimed, was carried in blood. Their heirs would be taken, not killed, purified. The court gasped, some cried, but none protested aloud. Because they saw something in her eyes that day, something brittle and infinite, like a mirror breaking across eternity, and none dared reflect it back. That night, the 10 heirs, some as young as 7, were taken from their chambers. They were stripped, anointed in ash, and locked in the Tower Chapel. They were told to pray. What happened in that chapel, no record preserved, only that, come dawn, the chapel was empty. No children, no bodies, only silence. And the queen smiled. But as the kingdom reeled from the horror, the ghost of the survivor moved once again. He had infiltrated the palace as a scribe, taken a forgotten name, and watched from the shadows. He learned the queen's hours, her fears, her muttered dreams. He knew her better than anyone. He did not want her dead. He wanted her undone. So he planted the seed. A scroll appeared on the queen's pillow one dusk. It bore no title, only a single passage written in the old dialect. "The gods keep what kings discard." Amara read it again and again. Then she found another, this one tucked inside her robes while she bathed. "Not all bones rot." A third stitched inside her mattress. "Justice is not a scream. It is a whisper that never stops." She summoned her guards. They swore no one had entered. She threatened to have them flayed. They wept and begged. She flayed one anyway. But the scrolls kept coming. More messages, more words carved into walls, burned into candles, etched into her own clothing. They were not threats. They were reminders of the feast, of the children, of the moment she had thought herself most powerful. It became clear to her. She was not being haunted by the dead. She was being observed by the living. Someone was inside her palace, inside her mind, undoing her inch by inch, and she could not stop it. And then came the moment she feared most. A servant boy, just 12, came to light her torches. He paused at the threshold and asked in the same voice she remembered from years ago, "Was he sweet, Your Majesty? The boy whose leg you served to his mother, was it tender?" She lunged at him, shrieking, but the boy had already fled, gone like smoke. The guards searched the castle. No such boy was ever found, no family missing him, no trace he had ever existed. But Amara knew. She knew the survivor had spawned something worse than rebellion. He had planted an idea. And ideas, she realized, do not die. They multiply. That night, she stood alone on the western balcony, watching the moon tremble on the poisoned river. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She only whispered one word to herself, again and again. "Who?" And then, just before dawn, a baby's cry echoed through the palace halls. But no child lived in the castle anymore. No child had been born within the castle walls for nearly 5 years. It was by Amara's own decree. No pregnancies, no infants, no laughter in the halls. The last child to cry within those stones had done so from a locked room, moments before being dragged into the feast at Carolith. Since then, birth itself had become an act of rebellion. The queen could not bear the sound of children, not out of grief, but because their voices reminded her that innocence still existed. So when that infant cry echoed from the corridors just before dawn, it did not sound like hope. It sounded like a curse returning to its source. Amara froze. She had not slept in 2 nights. The voice had returned, the voice that once wept beneath her throne room, the boy from the feast. But tonight the voice was not weeping. It was singing. A lullaby, one her mother used to hum. She left her chambers alone, clutching a ceremonial dagger, barefoot and trembling. The guards had already begun to search, but none admitted hearing the child. They looked at her strangely now, like servants awaiting the fall of a mad empress. She saw it in their eyes, pity. That was worse than fear. She descended the staircase to the old crypt, where the remains of the royal line lay in dust. Her father among them, preserved in salt and linen, a crown of tarnished gold resting over eyeless sockets. The cry came again, clearer, closer. She followed it through the passage beyond the crypt, a tunnel used only during sieges. Her torch sputtered in the damp, her steps echoing with a hollow thud. The tunnel narrowed. She reached the old iron gate and found it open. A cradle stood in the middle of the chamber, covered in velvet, freshly stitched, untouched by dust or cobwebs. And in it, swaddled in linen marked with the royal sigil, lay a child. Its eyes were closed, its chest rose and fell, real, breathing. Amara stepped closer, dagger raised. The child did not stir. She reached down and found a note tucked beneath the wrappings. "This one bears your blood. Shall we feed it to justice too?" She screamed. The child woke and began to cry. She stumbled back, heart pounding, lungs burning with something she had not felt in years: panic. She ordered the child taken, hidden, smothered if necessary. Her guards hesitated, repulsed. One of them, a young soldier with ink-stained fingers, stepped forward and said gently, "Your Majesty, there was no cradle." The others nodded. No child, no note, no velvet, no witness. Only Amara, alone, shrieking in an empty tunnel, her dagger shaking in her hand. Something broke inside her that night. Not loudly, not with ceremony, but the way glass shatters underwater, silent and final. She returned to her chambers and locked the doors. For the first time since her coronation, she summoned the old priestess. Mother Yulsa had been banished years ago after claiming that the blood rituals Amara practiced had torn the veil between the waking and the damned. She had lived in the mountains since, half blind, speaking to winds and bones. She came not as an advisor, but as an undertaker, the kind one summons when hope has already been buried. Amara demanded answers. Ilsa gave none, only stared at her long and hard. "You have become what you feared," she whispered. "Not queen, not tyrant, not even woman. You are a hollow throne, and someone is sitting inside you." Amara struck her. The old woman bled, smiled, and spoke one last sentence before being dragged away. "You are not the last to wear your skin." The queen dismissed everyone that night. She burned the tapestries. She scratched the gold leaf from her mirrors with broken fingernails. She sat in the middle of her chamber, whispering to no one. And then, her door opened, not slammed, not creaked. It simply opened. A man entered, young, familiar. He did not speak. He knelt before her, placed something in her lap. It was a child's tooth, still bloodied at the root. Amara looked up, her mouth forming a question, but the man was already gone. The door remained open. And now, finally, she understood. He had never needed to kill her. He was replacing her. The court would never know, and they would see her sit the next morning, same crown, same voice. But piece by piece, he was consuming her from within, through guilt, through madness, through something far darker. Because what dies in fire can return in shadow, and what is devoured can devour in return. The queen did not rise the next morning. Servants knocked, then pounded, then screamed. When they finally broke down the doors of her private chamber, they found the room cold, the windows unlatched, and the fire long dead. She was sitting on the floor, legs folded beneath her like a doll discarded mid-play. Her eyes were open, mouth parted, lips whispering something only the dead could understand. But it was not the queen they remembered. This woman was gaunt, her skin sallow as candle wax. Her hair had grown wild and tangled, streaked with ash and strands of silver. She wore no crown, no robes. Only a shift stained with wine. Or was it blood? She blinked once, then looked up at them as though she no longer remembered what humans were. When her chancellor knelt beside her and said gently, "Your Majesty, it is time," she responded in a voice so thin and unfamiliar that even he hesitated. "Time for what?" They dressed her. They bathed her, combed her hair, painted her lips, but her hands shook. Her eyes wandered the corners of the room. She flinched at whispers, at bells, at the clink of cutlery. She no longer barked orders, only asked again and again, "Do you hear him? Does he speak to you too?" Yet no one dared name him. The court had begun to refer to the figure only as the Shade. No one had seen him clearly. No one knew his name, his rank, his purpose, but he appeared in places he should not, in council chambers, among servants near the kitchens, always unnoticed, always unchallenged. When asked later, no two people could agree on what he looked like. Some said tall, others said crooked, some swore he had no eyes. But all of them remembered his voice, calm, cold, familiar, and always asking the same thing: what would you do to undo a feast? One by one, ministers began to disappear. First, the chancellor, then the master of coin, each gone without trace. Their rooms untouched, their beds still warm. The queen seemed not to notice. She took to walking the halls barefoot, speaking to walls, to empty chairs. The palace staff began burning incense outside her door, not for her protection, but their own. Then came the final ritual. The queen declared that the bloodline was cursed, that her father's sins and hers had soaked into the very stones. She ordered the royal vault opened, where generations of monarchs had been buried in gold-leafed coffins. They expected a prayer, a cleansing. Instead, she entered alone and locked the door behind her. She stayed there for 3 days. On the 4th morning, she emerged barefoot, covered in soot, her arms streaked with blood. In her hand, she held the royal signet. It had been swallowed. She told the court, "The crown has been fed, now the throne is clean." But nothing was clean. That night, the palace shook. Servants spoke of a scream rising from the vault, low, guttural, inhuman, like something ancient had awoken, something old and hungry. The queen dismissed all her advisors the next morning. She dissolved the council. The guards at her door were replaced by children, mute, pale, not known to any family. They did not blink, they did not speak, they only watched. And still, the shade wandered. One brave knight, Sir Elian, famed for his duels, followed him through the kitchens, down into the cellar, past the barrels and into a corridor long sealed. Only one man returned. But it was not Sir Elian. It wore his armor, it bore his voice, but it smiled too much. The final banquet was announced with no warning, invitations carved into bone, guests summoned by name, not title. The nobles obeyed, some weeping, others drunk with terror. They came dressed in mourning black, expecting death. Instead, they found her seated at the head of a long table. Queen Amara, radiant, healthy, young, the woman they remembered from before the war. She raised a goblet. "Tonight, we feast as we once did," she said, "before the hunger, before the rebellion, before guilt." No one moved. The shade stood behind her, watching. The first course was served, silver platters, warm and fragrant. None dared lift the lids, until one boy did, a stable hand too young to know fear. He peeled back the silver, looked down, and smiled, then laughed. The queen turned to him, eyes wide. "You," she whispered, "you are not..." He interrupted, voice sweet, gentle. "Mother." Gasps broke the silence. Her hand trembled. The wine spilled across the table like blood. The boy looked at the guests. His teeth were too sharp. "Let us eat." And as the queen stared, frozen, she saw every guest smiling back at her. With his smile. Every single one. And then she understood. She had not killed the rebellion. She had fed it! If this haunting tale gripped you till the end, do not forget to subscribe for more dark history and chilling mysteries. New stories every week. True, twisted, unforgettable.